Hello, and welcome to Endor N-Gauge Model Railway. I'm Jonathan. There were a few areas of track on Endor's curves that didn't line up well at the join. I've talked about my struggles with track laying in videos 3 and 9, and needed to get these areas sorted. I decided to hammer a small nail into the board right next to the track to wedge the rail into the right position. The nails I used are furniture ones from the back of a decommissioned set of drawers. They're small, but look big compared to the track. They're strong enough to do the job, but small enough that my heavy-duty cutters could cut off the nail head. I then used some kind of center punch to drive the rest of the nail down until level with the sleepers. This works because the Pico Code 55 track rail has a hidden section that's embedded in the plastic webbing between the sleepers. The rail itself is taller than Code 55, but what's usually visible is Code 55. When I eventually ballast up to the level of the top of the sleepers, the ballast should come level with the nail stub, which I can then paint grey to blend in and stop it being reflective. The nail worked well in the area where I'd had the worst track alignment, so I did the same in two other areas. In one case where I had a track fixing nail that wasn't quite strong enough and which I hadn't thought about cutting the head off, and the other place was where I'd used a point motor rod to do this job. The point motor rod hadn't ended up in quite the right place and was at more risk of falling down into the door. Trains have since been running well over these joins. Several weeks passed where when Endor was out I focused on electrics or just running trains, before my attention returned to track work. I found that as I've spent more time building this railway, and in the last few months also spending a lot more time watching other people on YouTube build theirs, I've been noticing more detail than I used to. One of the things that started to stand out to me was the large chunks of plastic around the tie bar area of Pico points. I didn't remember noticing anything like this on the real railway, and having looked at some real track, I decided these needed to be trimmed off, because they were really standing out to me as eyesores. They're probably there for surface mount point motors to attach to directly, but I can't say I've seen anyone do that. Pico markets its Code 55 track as fine scale, so it seems like a strange choice to have these huge plastic bits on them. Anyway, I'd first come to this conclusion before I'd finished laying all of the points. On most of them, I cut the extra plastic off before laying the points. But I hadn't done this with the earlier ones and needed to fix them. To start with, I tried my luck with a craft knife, but the plastic was too thick. I cut part of the tie bar off. On each set of points, I only needed the hole on one side. I then tried the other bits with a razor saw, and that was okay, but I only really had room to use it on one side of one point. Eventually, a Dremel did a good enough job. In all cases, I needed to be very careful not to cut the tie bar itself, so often finished off with the craft knife. Satisfied with the points themselves, the next eyesores were gaps in the cork and missing sleepers at track joins. I plugged some gaps in cork that I'd left for cable routing but never actually used, and added a thin cork layer over some cables that seemed to have space for it. I didn't fix all of the gaps in one go, and in between fixes, a sound-fitted Class 60 that I'd had on order for 4 or 5 months arrived. This is a Graham Farish model, and straight out of the box it worked perfectly well, with very smooth running and great sound. I gave it the instructed 30 minutes running in each direction. As is usually the case with all manufacturers now, the model looks great. It also seems to be increasingly common to have independent front and rear light control, which is good for those who want that level of detail. And this one comes with cab lights that can be controlled independently, which is a nice detail. There are some minor niggles though. The glazing in the cab windows looks more toy-like than usual. I'm not sure what causes this, perhaps it's thickness or reflectivity. There's a fair bit of light bleed in the side of the cab from the headlight, which is very noticeable in low light. And there only seems to be one headlight at each end. On the real thing, the light on one side is far brighter than the other, but both are present and visible. But mostly these things are minor. The light bleed is the only annoying one when running in low light. These issues aren't going to stop me from really enjoying this loco. I'm particularly enjoying the sound-fitted models that I have, whether steam or diesel. Back to the track. I'd fitted spare sleepers to some areas before, I'd been able to slide the sleepers under the track sideways, but I found I couldn't do that in a few places this time. There didn't seem to be enough space. Perhaps the copy decks was thicker here, or it had reduced the squashiness of the cork. I slid a spare pair of tweezers under the track to lift it a bit. I didn't want to lift the track any higher than necessary, so eventually I used the tapered side of the tweezers and pushed them under only as far as needed. I'd used copy decks on the first sleepers that I glued in place several months ago, but found that the springiness of the copy decks didn't hold them firmly in position, so I switched to PVA glue. To start with, I struggled to find something that I could use to apply a fine bead of glue, but then remembered I had fine glue applicators, which I'd seen in use on the Excellent Chandor channel. They were ideal. I don't think I'm completely done with track electrics yet. I've bought some bits that might let me make the connections to the relays tidier and more compact, but I'm keen to get started on something scenic. To that end, I've also started to fill gaps in the cork between tracks, mainly on the curves, in preparation for ballasting. An exciting development for Endor is that it now has a place to live where it can stay out, after a concerted effort to clear out things that we no longer need from a spare room. Maybe by the next video it will be in its new home. That's all for now though. Bye bye.